Alright, so this is going to be a quick tutorial about the basics behind chemical bonding. The lesson objectives for this will be to define what a chemical bond is, to explain why most atoms form chemical bonds, to explain the Octet Rule, and to describe the types of bonding. Okay, so what is a chemical bond? It's basically just an attraction between atoms that creates chemical substances that have two or more atoms. So you have atoms by themselves, they bond, they get together somehow, and they form these new chemical substances, and because of that, now they have at least two or more atoms. Most atoms in normal state, or so on Earth, what we know of as normal, do not exist by themselves. Okay. Now there's a reason for this, and the reason for this is because if you remember, it's related to what we went over in the previous unit, that atoms want to have filled valence shells. The universe wants the elements to have filled valence shells, and most main group elements follow this octet rule, and the basis of octet rule is they want 8 electrons on that outside shell. So when it has 8 electrons on that outside shell, it's most stable, and that is why atoms bond to begin with, because they want those 8 electrons on the outside. There's an example right here. If you can actually decipher this, is actually water. This is how water bonds. We have oxygen right here, and it has 6 valence electrons on the outside of it normally, but when there's 2 hydrogens bonded to it, now it takes one of the or it shares one of the electrons, I should say, from the hydrogen here. So now one of these is hydrogens, and it's sharing it with the oxygen, and then another one's hydrogens, and it's sharing with the oxygen. So now oxygen has 8 electrons on the outside, and that kind of follows the octet rule. We're going to talk more about this later. Okay, so they want 8 valence electrons. That's the main goal of the octet rule. Atoms bond to get filled valence shells, and while doing that, they become more stable. So that's basically why most atoms are bonded, because they want to be more stable. Okay. So there's 2 main types of chemical bonding that we're going to go over in more detail later on, but this is just an intro for them. It's ionic bonding and covalent bonding. Ionic bonding is kind of just basically how it sounds. It involves the bonding of ions. Okay, so you have it occurs from attraction between cations and anions. Now cations, if you remember, they're positive ions, where anions are negative ions. So the positive and the negative will attract each other, opposites attract, and form this ionic bond. If you also remember, metals tend to form cations. Metals form positive ions, and nonmetals form negative ions. So because of that, it's ionic bonding involves a bond between metals and nonmetals. It's really important to remember, and we're going to go over this more in the next video. Covalent bonding, on the other hand, is a bond between nonmetals. Okay, and this occurs because electrons are sharing between atoms. It's kind of like our example before with water. We're going to talk more about this later as well. This video is just meant to kind of introduce to you what chemical bonding is and the ideas behind it. If you have any questions about this video, let me know.